I'm happy to be here. My name is Mary Falver Holmes, and I have a cold. I'm sorry. My voice is scratchy, but I'll do my best. I'm a member of the Author Selection Committee for the festival, and it is my privilege and honor to introduce our next speaker, Helen Elaine Lee, as she tells us her story and journey as a writer. Helen's third novel, Pomegranate, was longlisted for the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction Award and named by Amazon as one of the best books of 2023. Helen is a Harvard Law School alum and practiced as an attorney for a while and has taught creative writing at MIT for the last 29 years. Pomegranate is a book I found incredibly challenging as well as brilliantly enlightening. Helen draws on her experience working in prisons, helping inmates to learn the craft of creative writing. The story describes the life of a young woman, black woman in Boston, Renita Atwater, as she struggles through adolescence in a battle with her high-achieving, domineering mother, but with the unwavering love of her quiet and studious father. Through a series of poor choices and associations with the wrong crowd, Renita has fallen down the path of drugs and addiction, ultimately sentenced to 4 years in prison. She loses custody as well as the trust of her children and of her aunties, who have come to help her father raise his grandchildren. The life she leads in prison is mostly dismal, with occasional moments of passionate love and light. Her getting out day does not lead to the ultimate freedom as she had dreamed, but rather she must fend off the memories and seductions from the same choices that took her down in the first place. Her total focus is the sobriety she needs that will support her reunification with her children. But it's not easy. Helen artfully weaves past and present, even as Renita cries out, "What am I supposed to do, remember or forget?" Just as the pomegranate that her father gave her is rough and scratchy on the outside, Renita claims the beautiful and complicated seeds on the inside. Her journey is challenging, not a straight trajectory. Helen portrays that journey with incredible skill, empathy, and insight. She paints the picture, and we can see it vividly. Please join me in welcoming Helen Elaine Lee.
Hello, everyone. So I'm so grateful to be with you today among such wonderful writers. And I want to thank Amy Ulmer and the festival organizers for finding a way to respect the plight of the Hilton hotel workers and also finding a way to make the festival happen. And Mary Falver for being such a warm and helpful liaison, and all of you for being here. So, stories have been the transformative thread through my life. Growing up, I sat with my mother while she read to me, and as I listened, the world magically widened and came alive. She showed me the communion and challenges offered by literature and instilled in me an ethic of venturing. He wanted Sonny to strike out for deep water, she read from James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues. And we talked about what the differences might be for us between deep water and drowning. We discussed the role of the witness and the need to raise one's voice. Those weekend afternoons were shared with many characters, alongside Don Quixote and Odysseus in the canon of our own making, was the ancestor who sneaked along rows of cotton in the night, teaching fellow slaves to read. These were the stories on which I was fed. I try to write and live in my family traditions of believing in the power of words and taking risks in living. And I carry those afternoons by my mother's side, spent with all the characters of world literature, into every experience. In my fiction, I try to represent those things particular to my Black heritage, to tell the stories of my people, our languages and landscapes and histories, and I draw on these traditions to illuminate matters that are shared and human, and to agitate for change. I'm interested always in how people pull light from darkness, and how we renew and reinvent ourselves. And in everything I write, I'm exploring remembering the role of narrative in our lives and how we persist in the face of deprivation. My first novel, The Serpent's Gift, is about regeneration, about the beginnings that lie in endings. In this book, two families are bound by violence and loss. Through three main narrative threads, which periodically intersect, the novel raises questions about what the hero journey entails and costs. The story is grounded in the Great Migration and is interwoven with oral storytelling in the Black tradition. Vesta Smalls, marked by her father's violence and sudden death, believes in the single misstep and lives far too safely and restrictively to embrace the range of experience. LaRue, shaman and storyteller, rebel and trickster, makes a quest to claim his personal, familial, and racial past and embraces the polarities of experience. And for Ouida Staples, an illegal abortion in the 20s is the impetus for an inward journey of the imagination through which unconventional choices and an ongoing struggle for awareness are possible. The characters in my second novel, Watermarked, have suffered a failure of a spoken language, and they tell their stories visually through mosaics, painting, headstone carving, and assembling objects to narrate their life stories. Through dealing with their loss and the way it changes their understanding of the past, the characters explore the healing and structuring powers of imagination and invention. In this novel, two young sisters ask their grandmother why the music she sings sounds so troubled, and she tells them that music and art have both joy and trouble in them, and that they should reach you in the place where you bleed most freely, in the quick. In that novel, I was writing partly about the effort to reach this most plugged-in place and about making art as a way of doing so. Reading, writing, and talking about literature take me to the quick. My mother, a professor of comparative literature, gave me stories and poems to see by, and my interest in the lives of people who are incarcerated and enmeshed in the criminal legal system was instilled in me by my father, who was a criminal defense attorney. Having grown up attending segregated schools, barnstorming on courts owned by white people to compete in segregated tennis, serving in the segregated army during World War II, he understood the force of inequity. He went on to graduate from Harvard Law School in 1949, along with two other Black men and no women at that time. And he passed on to me what he had learned in his life work, that everyone has a complex and important story worth hearing, that many people grow up without love or opportunity or choices, and that justice is a fiction for some of us. The people he represented were not invisible to me as I was growing up. Their lives were connected to mine. And I understood from both parents and from the ancestors who continue to speak to and through me that I had a responsibility to use the privilege and access I was given to speak up and out. I stand on my parents' shoulders, on the shoulders of my people, those who've had a measure of access and privilege, those whose lives have been constricted by poverty, scant resources, state-sanctioned brutality, exclusion, those who have struggled with captivity and addiction. It's the role of the fiction writer to try to imagine lives different from her own. And although the lives of imprisoned people were not invisible to me, I knew that I needed to try and earn the story I wanted to tell, so that it would not feel appropriative, so that it would not be another taking from people who had been traumatized. So I began 20 years ago to volunteer leading storytelling and creative writing workshops for people locked up, first in a county house of correction, and then in a medium security prison and a pre-release facility. And for 8 years, through the Prison Creative Writing Program that I helped to establish as a board member of Penn New England. In those workshops, I was transformed by what people had endured, by the survival of dignity, by the practice of divining what has mattered in our lives. I was moved by the self-interrogation and generosity I witnessed. For those writers behind the walls, telling their stories was an assertion of visibility, of meaning, of their humanity. Writing is an act of recovery and constructive defiance. And in those workshops, we all had the chance to bring forward our best selves. In this environment, and with the layered history of suffering experienced by so many imprisoned people, writing and reading are means of psychic survival. They help people to ask, what if? And with writing stories and poems and essays, imprisoned people are asserting that they are more than their trauma, more than the worst things that have happened to them and the worst things they have done. They are actively revising their writing and their lives. Writing, and that entails revising, which literally means reseeing, is hard work wherever and however it's done. And the effort to do it, to recover and maintain one's humanity while mired in loss, is an act of power that awes and inspires me. And I'm indebted to those participants and to others whose lives were touched by incarceration for the stories they shared with me. When I began volunteering on the inside, I didn't know what shape my writing would take. I just listened for a couple of years until the characters and stories I wanted to tell began to take shape in my imagination. Renita was alive to me from the beginning when she was one of an ensemble of 10 characters in a novel called Life Without that I was unable to get into the world. In recent years, at a time of loss for me, she became the protagonist of my novel Pomegranate, which was published last April. Her opening lines announce the novel's structure and also one of its central thematic concerns. She says, I live my life forward and backward. Seems like my body remembers what I can't afford to forget. I'll be carrying on, trying to choose right, and then the past comes for me, rumbling from my chest into my shoulders, pushing through my neck and up into my head. I try and answer its call, own where all I've been. Remember, even when forgetting feels like the only mercy. As the novel unfolds, Renita tells her present tense journey of getting out of Oak Hills prison after a 4-year bid for opiate possession and trying to stay clean, repair her relationships with her kids, own her love for Maxine, the woman on the inside who's helped to inspire her, and grapple to accept and tell her full and complex story. Her journey depends on the strength to go backward and remember the past that has formed her. And her voice is intercut with that of a third-person narrator who brings alive that past, revealing some of the pivotal moments in her life at Oak Hills and during her growing up that inform her present tense journey. Much has been written about incarceration from an academic and sociological distance, but fiction has the potential to move us past fear and indifference, to experience the emotional truths of other people's lives. Indeed, fiction can be inherently revolutionary by asking us to imagine the world and imagine our lives differently. It has the potential to disrupt and deepen our understanding by challenging the master narrative, the ideological script setting forth what's legitimate and valid and beautiful and true, imposed by those in power on the rest of us. I wanted readers to feel the lived and emotional truths of addiction, imprisonment, and recovery. I volunteered, interviewed people who'd been incarcerated, and talked to family members and people who had been in community with them. I tried to educate myself through reading, watching films, and community engagement about various aspects of the novel. I also drew on the personal to write Pomegranate. Loved ones pained by addiction and abuse, my own story of mothering and daughtering and family, my understanding of the ongoing roles and intersections of race, gender, class, and sexuality in our lives, my experience of queerness and queer communities, what I know about the tensions between fierceness and sensitivity, belonging and marginality, the struggle and recompense of speaking out. I drew on my experience with the mandate to carry on, the healing forces of narrative and nature, the ways in which the present is burdened by the past. Inspired by the seeds my parents planted in me, I tried to conjure Renita's world and life and the lives of those who'd been important to her story, to provoke readers to strike out for deep water and be inspired by her as she wrestles with the past and tries to raise her voice. As the framework for Renita's journey is the devastating emotional and psychological toll of this society's retributive, carceral, and criminal legal systems, I wanted to make readers feel the dehumanization and deprivation that Renita and her fellow imprisoned women experience. A 2016 Vera Institute of Justice study found that 86% of incarcerated women had experienced sexual violence. 82% had struggled with addiction, and nearly 80% were mothers. I wanted to embody this in Renita's story, and I wanted to show how trauma and sexual violence pave the way to addiction, which paves the way to imprisonment. And I wanted also to connect the trauma of incarceration to this society's history of enslavement, its convict leasing and Jim Crow systems, its racial terrorism, sharecropping, exploitation through forced and unpaid and low-wage labor, and the ongoing right-wing project of exclusion, disenfranchisement, domination, and control. And also, I wanted to show the spirit of resistance that is healing, empowering, and also ongoing. And that is a fundamental aspect of the story of Black survival in this country and throughout the African diaspora. The forces of collective action, kinship, imagination, connectedness, nature, creative expression, love, have always inspired us to make a way out of no way. I tried to evoke the pain of violence echoing in the bodies and souls of the characters in Pomegranate, and to illuminate the struggle to be human and complex and defiant and hopeful and loving within the context of oppressive state authority. Through this novel, I wanted to examine experiences, generational, historical, familial, interpersonal, that have been wounding, especially for Black women, and also to ask how we can reclaim our bodies and our vision and our voices. Informing Renita's addiction are the ravages of her experience and inheritance, yet the generative resources around and within her can be accessed and retrieved. As I wrote her and showed her struggling to understand and accept the past, struggling with the temptations of oblivion and with all the things that can pull her down and limit her and silence her, I knew that I needed to give her some powerful resources to draw on in order to persist and survive and ultimately thrive. She has a curiosity of intellect and heart. She has the history of her people within which to place herself and codes of respect and common bonds that come with that. Her deep connection to the natural world and the universal feeling of connectedness that provides are critical to her journey. And one of her most powerful sources of sustenance is her love of novels and stories. For her, as for me, books, and especially works of fiction, have been life-giving, a refuge, a way to travel and commune, a way to speculate, a source of strength. As she says to her lover, Maxine, when they're first getting to know each other at Oak Hills, quote, "Novels tell the truth, the inside kind, about what's going on here, she said, touching her belly, and here, pointing to her head. People like to think fiction's less serious than other kinds of writing, and I'm here to tell you it can make the real more bearable. But that doesn't make it escapist or flimsy, and I don't think novels and stories just give you a picture like a photo with words. They comment, they speculate, and the making up and rearranging of the facts are about showing what is and has been true and what could be. There's lots of ways to tell a story, I guess, Maxine responds. Novels, they've always been, I'm sorry, Renita continues to talk. Novels, they've always been what speaks to me clearest, and they prove you're not alone. Earlier, Renita has asked Maxine, you a reader? Always have been. History, biographies, politics. Renita nodded. She felt like a lightweight in those areas. I'll read anything, but I prefer fiction. It saved me growing up. Even so, I got away from it in the dark times, you know. I do. Found my way back, though, here in captivity. Yes, Maxine said, you had to find some kind of light to steer by. Maxine's lights include a liberatory politics and engagement, legal work for those on the inside, a warrior spirit, and a gift for constructive defiance, imagination to redress the mystery deficit of life behind the walls, and both naming and conjuring the things and experiences of beauty and meaning in the world that are available to everyone, the free things, she and Renita call them. The sharing of their practices and outlooks becomes sustaining for both of them. Collective action and solidarity, kinship and allyship have been critical to struggles for racial, economic, gender, and sexual justice, and intersectional belonging that honors our complex experiences and identities is also necessary for surviving and thriving. Renita draws on the connective tissue of relationships and community. She has the love and support of family, and she's struggling to show up for her daughter and son, for the aunts who've stood by her and her kids, and to honor her father and her people who helped to form her and who are both gone and not gone. She's trying to live the understanding that love is a practice in the James Baldwin sense, an ongoing process that asks everything of us: commitment, grueling self-interrogation, discomfort, and hard work, and asks what we are able to do out of what we feel and the codes we have learned. We do not always get it right. We're evolving, struggling for awareness and ability, correcting course, and revising and growing and grappling to show up for ourselves and others. As her Auntie Jessie tells her, when Renita is heartsick over her absence in the lives of her kids, over her missteps and deeds, and wishing she could get it all right once and for all, Jessie says, all day, every day, we've got to keep on choosing over and over who we're going to be. Renita is in community with her psychotherapist, whom she's mandated to see as part of her push for family reunification, and he comes to play a pivotal role in helping her to reveal what has happened to her and to read her life for meaning. She has had a sometimes community of women of color at Oak Hills, and she has a recovery community, though she's had some inner conflict about fitting there. She's struggling with exclusion, with where she's welcome and where she belongs, especially in terms of organized religion and the dogma of the church she grew up in, and in terms of what her queer identity is and what it means for her. She's struggling with the degree to which belonging and being loved mean being known, and with the balance between group affiliation and the self. She begins to resolve some of these questions, but indeed, they are lifelong conundrums for all of us. It has been my hope that the book would open up and affirm the experiences of Black communities, Black women, queer people of color, people who are and have been imprisoned, people who grapple with addiction, and also that the struggle to be known and seen and autonomous, to claim our fullness, and to be healed by community and stories and love and nature and wonder will speak to everyone. Perhaps most liberatory for Renita is her deep sense of wonder and possibility, instilled in her in part by her father. In the preface, as she grieves the death of the mother who has pained her, she peels back the plain rind of the pomegranate her father has given her to find, quote, "There was a whole world, strange and crazy beautiful underneath the skin, layer on crooked layer of ruby crystals, and chambers like inside a heart." We are all left to grapple with the echoing losses of our lives, but our bodies and our vision and our voices can be reclaimed. In our hearts, in our pomegranate hearts, alongside the losses are abundance and possibility, the beauty around and within and between us, the gifts we have been given belong to us, and we may find our hands filled, perhaps through memory and imagination, with what we need. It may be something everyday or seemingly small or ordinary on the outside and wondrous within. Through reading and writing, volunteering and teaching, I've had the opportunity to live with mystery and wonder and possibility, to reflect and take emotional risks, to divine what matters in my life, in the lives of others, in the larger world, to find my voice and raise it. I'm immeasurably grateful that I've been able to play a part in the revolutionary role of literature and the redemptive power of storytelling, that I have managed to live in my family tradition of striking out for deep water as witness and agitator in the quick. Thank you.
So before we talk about the book, we have a question. So you went to Harvard Law,
Yep.
got a law degree. How did you end up writing fiction instead of going into law? Did you practice law? Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't, you know,
You don't have to go through the whole story.
it's not that interesting. I think maybe I was following my father there. I don't know. He never articulated that expectation of me, but that might be part of what was going on. But I think I just was, I graduated from college and I had wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and then I thought maybe that wasn't for me, and I was just sort of at a loss. And I think a lot of students feel that way, and I think instead of being able to sit with the discomfort of that uncertainty and, my not being formed or being in process, which I still am, and we all are, I think I went to school because it felt safer. But I knew right away that it was, I try to see it positively as a detour, but I knew it was kind of a wrong turn. And I thought about I thought about not going back after the first year, but I didn't know what else. I didn't know what I could be at that point. So I went back and finished, and I did practice or do something law related for 9 years, but I started writing stories right away, and I approached it more as a job than a career. And then one of those stories grew into my first novel, and then I never looked back. So anyway, our paths are circuitous. I tell this, to my son, my 25-year-old son now. Most of us have straight paths toward what we end up being, and that's okay. So I guess I'm happy for all the things I learned in all of those law jobs about people, and I'm sure they have informed my writing.
Was your mom happy when you turned to literature?
Yeah, I think everyone was always puzzled when I went to law school, honestly. Yeah.
So, Renita is a queer woman whose story includes drug addiction, the brutality and intensity of life in a woman's prison, and motherhood. Did you start out with all those complicated direct trajectories, or did they evolve as you wrote?
Well, some of the things, I gave you those couple of statistics from that Vera Institute of Justice study. And so, some of the things I chose for her because they are so fundamental and so common, to the experience of imprisoned women. But, people have asked me that, like, why so much going on in that book? But that's how I am in the world. I experience the world with all those things in play. And so it's not like I set out to do them. I just told told it like I see it and live it. And, I tell students often that your stories are like a model, your model of how the world works. And so in some sense, I guess that's what's being reflected. All those things are, and more,
Right, happening at once.
are in play, yeah.
Okay. Were you thinking of any particular woman who you knew, who, as you crafted the character of Renita, even in the first novel that didn't
Yeah.
happen with Renita?
She wasn't based on any particular person, no, but I guess I drew from, all that listening that I did for those first few years, and then over the years, I don't know, I wouldn't say she's like I didn't say take an arm from here and a leg from here, but I don't know, she gathered shape and depth and, over time, and then, there's a lot of me in her. The facts of our lives are very different, but there's a lot of shared interior territory.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it happens for fiction writers in the explicit way people think, and it is kind of mysterious, and I don't know. So some choices, like to have her struggle with addiction and trauma, I knew those would be parts of her story. And as I said in my talk, I had to give her some things to work with, and I knew what, from the research I'd done and from being in community with people who were and had been in prison, that there are certain things that are necessary for survival and thriving. So, I gave her some of those things, but I don't know, the invention of like the family story, it just happened over the years of writing the book, I guess, and what I know about how the world works.
It seems like Maxine was crucial to her survival in
Yeah.
prison. So someone has asked, like, in the sequel, what happens to Maxine? Does she get out? Does she, they get together?
Yeah, there's not going to be a sequel to this. I'm writing another novel now, but it's not the sequel to this. But it is another journey, another woman's journey of healing, but somebody who the facts of her life are more like mine, and maybe in terms of our interiors are different. She's somebody who's measured things in terms of conventional determinations of worth, and I think that is up to the reader to imagine what happens between them, but I kind of like to imagine them together.
Well, on that note, we want to thank you for
Yeah.
being here. Thank you very much.